The dog came in on a Wednesday afternoon, and Kira Dunning knew the moment she saw him that she was going to lose her job. He was a Belgian Malinois, maybe 70 pounds, wearing a tactical vest with a Fort Decatur unit patch on the shoulder. His right foreleg had been wrapped in a field dressing that was already soaked through, dark, wet, and losing the fight. The soldier carrying him was Sergeant Wyatt Cassell, 26 years old, with blood on his uniform that wasn't entirely his own. He came through the ER doors at a near run, the dog's head against his chest, and his face had the particular look of a man who had already decided he would not be told no. He stepped on a training fragment, Cassell said to nobody and everybody at once, scanning for someone who looked like they knew what to do. We were running a live exercise at Decatur. The vet station is locked down. They're rebuilding the whole east wing. Someone said you could help. Kira was already moving toward them. She'd been an ER nurse at Millhaven Regional for 7 years. Before that, she'd done 3 years at a Level I trauma center in Louisville. She knew a hemorrhage when she saw one, and she knew that the tourniquet on Bolt's leg, that was his name, stitched on a small patch above the vest collar, had been applied correctly, but was not going to hold much longer. "Get him on Bay 4, she said. "Ma'am," Castle's voice cracked slightly, he's a dog." "I can see that, Sergeant. Bay 4. The ER wasn't busy, which was the only thing that went right that afternoon. Dr. Emilio Rast was at the nurse's station and caught Kira's eye across the room. She saw the flicker of hesitation in his face, the quick calculation, and she shook her head once, just slightly. "Don't." He looked away. He wasn't going to stop her, but he wasn't going to help her either, and she understood that completely. Bay 4 had a gurney, and Cassell laid Bolt down on it with a gentleness that Kira filed away somewhere behind her sternum. The dog was alert, which was a good sign. His dark eyes tracked everything, and when Kira pulled on her gloves and reached for the field dressing, Bolt turned his head and looked at her with an expression that she would describe later. To her sister, on the phone, after all of it was over, as the most deliberate act of trust she had ever received from a living creature. "He won't bite," Cassell said. "I know," Kira said, and she meant it. The fragment had gone deep into the soft tissue just below the carpus. Not arterial, that was the first good news, but there was significant vessel damage and the wound was dirty. Kira worked methodically. She irrigated, she assessed, she called for a suture kit and for lidocaine and for gauze, and the charge nurse, Danny Howell, brought everything without asking questions, because Danny had worked alongside Kira for 4 years and knew exactly when questions were useful and when they were not. "This is going to be okay," Kira said to Bolt, not because she was certain, but because it was true enough to say out loud. "You did good getting here." Cassell stood at the foot of the gurney with his arms at his sides and his hands closed into fists, the way people stand when they are trying very hard not to fall apart. He'd told her in those first few minutes that Bolt had been his dog for 3 years, that they'd done 2 deployments together, that Bolt could find IEDs from 50 meters out, and that 6 months ago he'd alerted on a device that would have killed 4 men in Cassell's own unit. He said it the way soldiers said things like that, quickly, matter-of-factly, as if the weight of it would crush him if he held it in his hands too long. Kira listened. She kept working. She got the fragment out in one piece. She was closing the wound when Helena Price walked into Bay 4. Director Price was the head of nursing operations at Millhaven Regional. She was 53 years old, had an MBA and a nursing degree she had not used in over 2 decades, and she wore her administrative authority the way some people wore expensive watches, visibly at all times so nobody forgot it was there. She had the kind of posture that filled a doorway, and she filled the doorway of Bay 4 completely. "Nurse Dunning." Kira didn't look up. "Director. What is happening in this bay?" It wasn't a question. Kira recognized the register, that flat, declarative tone designed to make you feel you were already caught, already guilty, already finished. She'd heard it before, from other administrators at other hospitals, and she had learned over 7 years that the only dignified response was to keep doing what you were doing. "I'm closing a wound on a military working dog," Kira said. "Shrapnel injury, soft tissue, no arterial involvement. He's stable. You are treating an animal in an acute care emergency room." I'm treating a patient who needed immediate care and had nowhere else to go. Kira secured a knot and reached for the gauze. The veterinary unit at Fort Decatur is under renovation. This was the closest option. This hospital does not treat animals. Price's voice had gone very quiet, which was worse than loud. That is not a gray area, Nurse Dunning. That is not a judgment call. That is hospital policy. Cassell stepped forward. Ma'am, I understand the policy, but Bolt is a United States Army working dog assigned to a special operations unit out of Fort Decatur. He has an active duty service record. He is not a... I am not speaking to you, Sergeant. Price didn't even turn her head. She kept her eyes on Kira. You will stop what you are doing. You will leave this bay, and you will come to my office. Kira pressed the bandage into place and secured it. She stripped off her gloves. She looked at Cassell. He was watching her with the expression of a man who has learned not to beg but is very close to it. And then she looked at Bolt, who was lying quiet on the gurney, his chest rising and falling, the terrible red of the field dressing replaced now by clean white gauze. She turned to face Helena Price. He's stable, she said. He'll need a veterinarian within the next few hours to verify the closure and get him on antibiotics. I've documented the procedure. Sergeant Cassell has contact information for the Fort Decatur vet unit. She reached up and unclipped her badge. I'll come to your office now. She had known, from the moment she told Cassell to take the dog to Bay 4, that this was where it was going. She'd made the calculation in approximately 4 seconds, and the answer had come back simple. The dog was going to die or lose the leg if she didn't act, and she was not the kind of person who could watch that happen and do nothing. She had her father's stubbornness, her mother always said. Her father, who had done 22 years in the Army and come home with a limp and a certainty that some things were worth the cost. Price's office was on the 3rd floor. The walk there felt like the longest of Kira's career. It lasted 11 minutes. Price laid out the case with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed it. Gross violation of hospital policy, potential liability exposure, conduct unbecoming of a registered nurse. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask for Kira's perspective. She slid a termination form across the desk at minute 9 and pointed to the signature line. Kira signed it. She was not going to argue. She had made her choice with full knowledge of the consequences, and she was not going to pretend otherwise. Security will escort you to your locker and then to the exit, Price said. Kira went to her locker. She changed out of her scrubs and into the jeans and pullover she'd worn in that morning. She took her phone charger, the small framed photo of her and her dad at her nursing school graduation, him in his dress uniform, her in her cap and gown, both of them squinting into the October sun. She took her water bottle, her running shoes, her hand lotion. She unhooked her car keys from the hook inside the locker door and dropped them into her pocket. The security officer, a young man named Trevor who had always been kind to her, didn't say anything as he walked her out. At the front doors, Danny Howell was standing just inside the lobby, her face working hard to stay composed. She caught Kira's arm and squeezed it once, hard. I'm sorry, Danny said. I should have done more. You have kids, Kira said. Don't. Outside, it was cold, late March in Kentucky, and the warmth hadn't committed yet. Kira realized she'd left her coat in the staff room. She'd been wearing it when she arrived that morning, hung it on the hook near the coffee pot, and walked right past it during the escort without thinking. She thought about going back for it, then she decided against it. She sat in her car in the parking lot of Millhaven Regional Medical Center for a long time. 12 years of nursing, 7 of them here. She had held the hands of people dying alone, had talked new parents through the panic of a first fever, had stayed 40 minutes past the end of a shift because a patient's family was still in the waiting room, and she hadn't been able to leave without telling them something herself. She had never once, not once in 12 years, looked at a patient and thought, this one isn't worth it. She wasn't sure if she was going to cry, and then she did, briefly and quietly, and then she stopped. She looked at the glass entrance of the hospital. Through it, she could see the lobby, the check-in desk, the corridor that led toward the ER. She started the car. She didn't drive anywhere. She just let it run. Her phone buzzed. She assumed it was Danny, or her sister, or maybe her landlord with completely wrong timing, and she nearly didn't look at it. The number was a 502 area code she didn't recognize. "This is Dunning," she answered, out of 7 years of habit. "Nurse Dunning." The voice on the other end belonged to a woman, low, unhurried, with the particular cadence of someone accustomed to being listened to the first time. "My name is Colonel Adrian Steele. I'm with Army Special Operations Command out of Fort Knox. I understand you treated a military working dog at Millhaven Regional this afternoon." Kira watched a sparrow land on the hood of the car parked next to hers. "I did." "And I understand you were terminated for doing so." "I was." A brief pause. "I also understand that Bolt is stable, and that the suture work was described to me by the Fort Decatur vet who assessed him approximately an hour ago as, and I'm quoting here, clean, precise, and probably better than what I would have done under those conditions." Kira said nothing. "I need to ask you to go back inside, Nurse Dunning." "I was escorted out, Colonel." "I know." Another pause, and in it Kira heard the controlled efficiency of someone who had already set several things in motion. "I have people inside now. I need you there." Kira looked at the entrance. Then she understood. The 3 dark vehicles she'd vaguely registered pulling into the fire lane while she sat in her car, she'd assumed it was nothing, an ambulance staging, a routine delivery. She understood now that it was not nothing. "Give me a minute," she said. She got out of the car. She didn't have her coat, and the wind came in off the ridge cold and flat, but she walked back toward those glass doors with her chin up and her keys in her hand, and she thought, Dad would have laughed at this. Then he would have told her she did the right thing. The lobby looked different than it had 20 minutes earlier, and it took her a moment to understand why. There were uniformed Army personnel, at least 5 of them, standing at measured intervals near the entrance and along the corridor toward administration. Not aggressive, not weapons drawn, just present, deeply, unmistakably present in the way that only people carrying the full weight of institutional authority can be present in a room. At the center of it stood Colonel Adrian Steele. She was tall, maybe 50, with close-cropped silver at her temples and the bearing of someone who had long since stopped needing to make herself look impressive. She wore her uniform with the ease of a second skin. She turned when Kira came through the doors and crossed the lobby toward her in 4 efficient strides. Nurse Dunning. She extended her hand, and when Kira shook it, the grip was firm, brief, and completely certain. "Thank you for coming back in." "What's happening?" Kira asked. "A few things." Steele glanced toward the corridor leading to administration, then back to Kira. Millhaven Regional has a federal partnership agreement with the Department of Defense, specifically with Fort Decatur, that was signed 14 months ago as part of a regional emergency care compact. Under that agreement, this hospital accepted an obligation to provide emergency treatment to military working dogs when the installation's own veterinary facilities are unavailable. She paused. Director Price was aware of that agreement. It was circulated to all department heads at the time of signing. Kira stared at her. Bolt was transported here specifically because the Fort Decatur Vet Station posted an availability notice to the regional compact last week, standard procedure when they go offline for renovation. This hospital was notified. The agreement was fully in effect. Steele's voice remained measured, factual, the way you described a situation that was already resolved. You were not violating hospital policy. You were fulfilling a federal contractual obligation. Director Price terminated you for that. The lobby was very quiet. Somewhere behind the check-in desk, someone had stopped typing. "Our JAG office contacted the hospital board 40 minutes ago," Steele continued. "Director Price is currently in a conversation with the board chair and the hospital's general counsel. I don't expect that conversation to be brief." She paused, and for the first time something shifted slightly in her expression. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. "Sergeant Cassell also asked me to tell you that Bolt ate half a cup of food an hour ago and that he is, apparently, attempting to chew through his recovery cone." Kira laughed. It came out louder than she expected, and it echoed off the lobby tile. "He did ask me to pass that along," Steele said, and something in her voice was almost warm. "Good nursing, Dunning. My office will be in touch." She turned and walked back toward the administration corridor, and the uniformed personnel fell into position around her with the smooth, unconscious ease of long practice. Kira stood in the lobby and just breathed. Danny found her there. She came at a half-run from the direction of the ER, badge swinging, hair escaping its braid, and she grabbed Kira by both arms and said, "Are you seeing this?" which was not a question. "I'm seeing it," Kira said. "Price has been in the boardroom for 45 minutes. Nobody's gone in or come out." Danny's voice was low and fast. Dr. Rask got a call from the board chair's assistant asking for a full timeline of what happened. He told them everything. She paused. "Everything, Kira. All of it." "Is he okay?" "He's the one who called the board chair's office." Danny's grip on her arms tightened for a moment. "He said watching you get escorted out was the worst thing he's seen happen in this hospital in 12 years. Kira didn't say anything to that. They went back to the ER together because there was nowhere else to go while the institutional machinery ground through its process, and because the ER was where Kira had spent the last 7 years of her life, and it was, in a way she couldn't quite put into words, home. Cassell was still there. He was sitting in a chair beside Bay 4 with Bolt on a lowered gurney next to him, one hand resting flat on the dog's side, rising and falling with each breath. The recovery cone was still intact, barely. Bolt looked up when Kira came in and his tail, slow, careful, moved twice. "He remembers you," Cassell said. "Dogs remember who helped them." Kira came to the gurney and ran her fingers lightly over the top of Bolt's head behind his ears in the soft place where the tactical vest didn't reach. Bolt leaned into it, approximately 3 ounces of pressure, the way animals do when they're in pain but still trying to tell you they're okay. "How are you holding up, Sergeant?" "Better now." He looked at her steadily. "I heard what they're saying happened. I want you to know. I'm sorry. I walked in here and put you in that position. And you brought him here because it was the right call," Kira said. "And I treated him because it was the right call. Neither of those things is your fault." He nodded slowly, and then he looked back at Bolt. "First deployment," he said after a moment. "We were in a village outside of Kandahar, 3 in the morning. Bolt alerted on a pressure plate beneath a doorstep, stopped the whole element cold. If he'd been half a second slower, or if I'd overridden him because it didn't look right to me, I wouldn't be sitting here." He stopped. "I've learned to trust him completely. I'd take a bullet for that dog without thinking twice." "I know," Kira said. "I could see that the moment you walked in." Castle glanced at her sideways. "My mom was a nurse," he said. "I grew up watching her go to work in scrubs. Didn't really understand what nurses did until I was about 20. He looked back at Bolt. "I do now." Kira's phone rang at 5:17. It was the hospital's interim board chair, a man named Werner, who spoke quickly and with the apologetic efficiency of someone cleaning up a very large spill. The termination was being rescinded, effective immediately. Director Price had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the federal inquiry into the compact agreement. Kira's position was hers if she wanted it. Her personnel record would reflect no disciplinary action of any kind. He said he was sorry. He said it twice, and the second time sounded like he meant it. Kira stood in the hallway outside the ER with her back against the wall and held the phone against her ear for a moment after the call ended. She thought about her father. He'd been stationed at Fort Campbell for 6 of his 22 years. A logistics officer who'd spent a long career moving things and people to where they needed to be and making sure neither got lost along the way. He'd always said that bravery wasn't charging toward danger. Bravery was choosing the right thing when the wrong thing was so much easier, so much safer, so much more comfortable for everyone involved. She'd never thought of her nursing that way before. It was just work. It was just what she did. She went back inside. The ER had the specific quality of a room that has been through something and is carefully returning to normal. Monitors beeped. A physician murmured on the phone with a family. Danny was updating a chart at the nurse's station and didn't look up when Kira came in, but the corner of her mouth moved. Bay 4 had a curtain now, partially drawn, and through the gap Kira could see Cassell still in his chair, one hand on Bolt, his head tipped back against the wall like a man who had finally allowed himself to rest. Bolt was asleep. The clean white bandage on his leg rose and fell with the slow, steady rhythm of a dog who was going to be all right. Kira picked up a chart from the nurse's station and went to work. The next morning, a Fort Decatur transport arrived at 6 a.m. to take Bolt back to the base. The vet station had managed to open one exam room ahead of the renovation schedule. Kira was finishing the last hour of a double shift she'd volunteered for because the night nurse had called out sick and because she hadn't been ready to leave. Cassell came to find her before they loaded Bolt into the transport. He had a card, a real one, paper, the kind you bought at a drugstore. Inside, in the careful handwriting of someone who didn't write many cards, he had written, "He's alive because of you. So are a lot of people who will never know your name. Thank you." Kira read it standing in the hallway outside the staff room. She put it in her bag, next to the small framed photo of her and her father. She thought, some days the cost of doing the right thing is everything you have. And some days not always, not often enough, but some days everything comes back. She tied her sneakers, picked up her water bottle, and went to start the morning rounds.